Hello and welcome at the GCP-Mindset channel. Today we speak about electronic data capture, or short EDC, and I have with me here Thomas Kissner. Thomas is expert in data management and electronic data capture. Thank you for being here.
Hi Andreas, great to be here. I look forward to it.
Hello Thomas, thank you for being here. As I said already, you're an expert in data management and EDC. You work already with several systems. Can you tell me a little bit more about you and what does it mean, EDC?
Sure. I studied biology, so during my studies I always worked with databases and database programming, so how to retrieve electronic data from a system and output it. Then I moved in the clinical research. Right now I have more than 6 years experience within clinical trials and running clinical trials concerning data management. Since you asked about EDC, what is EDC? It stands for Electronic Data Capture, as you said before. That's more or less a recording of data directly into an EDC system, an electronic tool, saving data electronically. So there are different EDC systems on the market, and we are working with several of them already.
Thomas, when you say electronic recording of data, it doesn't sound very modern to me. Actually, that's what we do every day on internet. What does it mean, EDC in clinical research? Could you explain it a little bit more detailed for a non-expert?
Yeah, Andreas, you're right. It's not innovative for me to store data electronically. We do it daily right now. But I know online banking, for example, it was also scary in the beginning. So since right now, I know people who love to do it still by paper, like writing a transfer on paper, walking to the bank account, waiting 1 or 2 days, and finally even paying for that money transfer. So within clinical trials, we also see such a movement. It's from paper-based record to an electronic record. That's what we call electronic data capture, where we store data in electronic case report forms rather than writing anything on paper. When we use an EDC system, comparing it to a paper-based new trial, we see that we can reduce cost, save time, and have also a higher data quality. All this has been proven within the last years, and so far I would even also say that the movement within clinical trial is going to electronic data capture, and that's by now more or less the standard.
Thomas, I like when you compare online banking and EDC. And for me, when you say people are scared of online banking, it's an emotional decision. It actually doesn't make sense to use the old way of banking, but people still do it because they are scared for doing something new. Is it the same with paper CRF versus electronic CRF? Is it just an emotional decision, or does it really make sense for some studies to use the old paper CRF?
In my opinion, it doesn't make sense anymore. Within our daily life, we almost store all data electronically. So I seldom see somebody storing a lot of paper electronically. But within clinical trials, we still see a lot of paper-based trials.
Do you know the number of paper CRFs used in clinical trials?
There are not exact numbers that we know, but a lot of white papers have the numbers about 25%.
25%, that's really amazing. When you think about how innovative the products are which are tested in clinical trials. So it's actually a very modern environment, but still an old-fashioned way of recording data, isn't it?
I completely agree, Andreas. So the decision to use paper case report forms is more or less mainly based on moves. So first, a paper-based trial will be cheaper. Second, paper is more secure and safe. Third, EDC systems need a lot of training for all parties involved, especially for investigators.
Okay, that's what I heard already. So it's cheaper, it's complicated to enter for the investigators, and it's not secure enough because we have a lot of internet crime nowadays. But you say it's not true.
Yeah, right. So concerning the cost, for example. Sure, there are setup costs and then there are license fees if you think about EDC systems. But concerning a paper trial, the costs for cleaning data and to finally close off the databasing afterwards are really much higher compared to the setup costs of any EDC systems. In addition, 20 years ago, perhaps, EDC was the new invention and therefore the costs were quite high. But nowadays, EDC systems, there are a lot of EDC systems on the market, and by that, the overall cost for an EDC system just reduces currently. Concerning training, sure, EDC systems need training, that's right, you have to invest in training. I would even say training will always pay out within clinical trials. And even there, the average person needs for training to use EDC systems is more or less 1 to 3 hours. And compared to the overall costs, that's really only a margin note.
And I think also the age of the investigators changed. Yeah, nowadays investigators are also quite young people. They are used to use electronic systems. Everybody has a smartphone nowadays. So it's not very innovative for them. For them, probably it's more complicated to use paper-based documentation, correct?
Completely agree, yeah.
Okay, EDC should be state of the art nowadays. I think you said already you used a lot of EDC systems, and I think the most common EDC system is the eCRF. So when you think about different eCRFs, what is a nice to have feature, what is a must have feature? I think there's a lot on the market. Can you give us some recommendations?
Andreas, from my point of view, that's easy to answer. So within EDC systems, you say there are a lot of new on the market. There are a common basic functions, like you having to store data, you have to open a patient record. There's also regulatory requirements, like audit trails. They all have that. But then, if you want to ask me about a special feature, it's not the advanced feature a system could bring, but the interconnections that a system can have. The highest value an EDC system can provide is the collection of all study data, centrally by connecting different electronic data sources. Think about all the data sources that we have in a trial. There's not only the clinical data that we record in the eCRF. Nowadays we use electronic randomization tools or even drug supply management tools, which can manage or confirm drug received at a site. Often there is also one or even more central labs involved, which provides clinical lab data. These data do not belong to the clinical labs only, but also central reviewers who analyze ECGs or even images, providing study data. In addition, more and more study subjects report directly data in electronic patient reported outcome, or short ePRO tools. For most sponsors, it means that they have several electronic tools to collect all the different data and store the data separately. The evaluation or cross-checks between the data needs to be done usually manually, and means a lot of work and risk data errors caused by manual data handling. In summary, we could say, first we use fancy e-tools to collect cleaner data, and afterwards we might unclean it again. There, for me as an experienced data manager and electronic data capture user, the most useful tools are the tools which can be connected to other tools directly in order to exchange the data automatically. To produce, for example, overall data listings, to compare data and cross-check them again. We learn so much more when we see all study data centrally compared to data pieces which need to be managed manually. Unfortunately, most tools are quite closed and cannot be connected with other EDC systems easily. The reason is just that most EDC providers are scared of spying, or they want to sell their own systems instead of open it for other systems. I personally consider the connectivity to other systems as an added value of EDC systems. A closed EDC is like a person who is extremely well educated and really clever, but nobody can understand what the person says. A high-tech tool is more worth when it can communicate with other tools to centralize remote monitoring activities, statistical monitoring, safety reporting, risk evaluation, and risk alerting for all study data together, instead of watching data pieces step by step. Summarized, that would be my most important advice for people who are not that experienced with the use of EDC tools. I have seen sponsors who took more care of all their separate tools than they cared for the overall study. We need always to keep in mind that EDC systems should serve us, but not we the EDC. If the study team gets the feeling they need to take care of the EDC system, the situation needs to be changed urgently.
Yeah. I'm also quite often asked by sponsors what kind of EDC system should be used, and I tend to ask them the question, what kind of car do you drive? Do you like to drive a Polo or a Golf or maybe Mercedes or even a Bentley? And I think also in terms of EDC systems or choosing an EDC system, there are Polos on the market, there are Golfs, Mercedes and even Bentleys. And they need to ask themselves what kind of EDC system do they want to drive. Do you know Polos, Golfs and Bentleys on the market?
Yeah, Andreas, sure. There are high pricing and lower pricing EDC models on the market. So there's a lot of variety. When it comes to EDC system, I would say it needs to be evaluated on the trial level and also on the budgeting for the trial. Since what we want to do is conduct the study and we don't want to facilitate an EDC system. What I mean by that is, let me give you an example. When I wanted to drive my kids to the school and then drive further to my work, I don't use a racing car. But even we both agree, racing cars are much more faster than my normal car. But there it needs to be compared, what do you want to achieve with that system. So I would say the service within clinical trial, that's crucial, since we all want to conduct the study rather than have fancy EDC systems.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think sponsors forget very often the objective of using an EDC system, running a study from A to Z, and instead of asking for the value of the EDC system, they're asking for the price. When we are coming to the value, I think we both agree that the value and the price do not correlate, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but when we think about the value, what does increase the value of an EDC system? What kind of features would you say would reduce the costs at the end of the day?
Yeah. There are a lot of topics that we can name over there. So first, I would say it's the possibility to review data remotely. So the monitors that normally having to go to the clinical center and review the data there, there's a lot of costing involved. Right now, they can do that remotely. We can even do data cleaning remotely. That's a high advantage concerning time and also money. Second, also risk identifiers can be extracted directly from the data in EDC systems. So when we are talking about serious adverse event reportings or even risks identified in the beginning of the studies can be extracted by the data and directly provided to the project manager, to the safety group or any other party involved.
Yeah, safety reporting by the eCRF is a very good example and a nice topic. We discussed it already in one of our former interviews. When you think about the handwriting of most of the investigators, it of course completely makes sense to record everything electronically. But let's move a little bit to another EDC system. eCRF is for investigators, study nurses, or site staff, but we have a very nice other EDC system which I think is also the future of clinical studies. It's ePRO. ePRO stands for Electronic Patient Reported Outcome, and I think in future we will try to get more data recorded directly by the patients. What do you think?
Andreas, I completely agree. I think even within clinical trials we are moving forward and we will retrieve more and more data by the patient directly. So concerning ePRO systems, we also developed our own ePRO system, but there are also several modules, devices and solutions on the market. What questions do you have concerning ePRO?
As far as I know, the FDA even requires for some clinical trials the use of ePRO. So they don't accept paper patient-reported outcome anymore. They really want to see electronic systems. So that means a lot of sponsors need to go that way. And if you need to recommend something to them, what kind of factors are important for choosing a ePRO system?
Right, the FDA recognized long ago the benefits from electronic data records. When we are talking about electronic paper reported in the outcome, the FDA requires within clinical study electronic record if the endpoints are concerned with the patient reported outcome. So when a sponsor should evaluate electronic ePRO system, that should be kept in mind. It is required when endpoints are relevant within patient-reported outcome.
So that means, for example, the quality of life of a patient is the primary endpoint of the study.
Correct.
So if I think about ePRO, I have in mind diaries, for example, or quality of life questionnaire. But what else is on the market, and what else is important for patient-reported outcome?
Diaries and questionnaires are the most common topics within patient-reported outcome. By looking also into the future. So let's think about vital signs or any spirometry data. How would it be if we can directly retrieve the single data from the patient directly using an ePRO system? I think our market will evolve there quite quickly. I'm thinking about the digital pen or answer voice system where a patient can directly recording his answers without entering any data, just using his voice. So there will be a lot of new progress on the market and a lot of development. There are still obstacles on the way, like we wanting to ensure the safety of patients, sure, and also data security needs to be considered. But I'm sure we will see a lot of development in that area.
Yes, Thomas, that would be great. But let's also speak here about the costs. And I still can remember a time where sponsors needed to provide all the devices, the smartphones or palms to the patients. That means they needed to buy hundreds of devices, which doubles the cost of the whole study for the patients. Is that still necessary?
Nowadays, almost 80% of all people use smartphones. So Andreas, why not use their devices while using an ePRO system? But when you think about the system and the value and the cost it provides, I would just recommend you to use a web-based system as ePRO, and by that you don't have to provide any devices, since nowadays almost everyone has a smartphone and know how to use it.
So that would mean it would be even cheaper because you don't need to print anything, you need to send out anything, you're just using the device of the patient.
Right. You even don't have to provide anything since that's their own device.
And that also means less training.
Right.
Yeah.
Everyone knows how to work with his own smartphone.
Yeah. Thomas, that sounds like a perfect world. Using ePRO, so many advantages, but I think there are also limits. Yeah, when you say 80% of the people have smartphones already, there's still 20% without smartphones. What kind of people are these 20%? And do you have problems with elderly people?
Of course, there are limits. Sure, but when you say about 20%, are those 20% that you need in your study? Even there, you can need to have a mixed model where you could provide a certain amount of devices in each person by reducing the overall costs to provide devices to everyone. When you're asking about the elderly people, our experience with smartphones and the use with the ePRO systems in elderly populations is quite great, since mostly they have difficulties with reading, and within smartphones, reading anything, it's just like that, and they know this. So it's quite intuitive, and they are highly effective concerning that. Even when we compare the data from elderly people stored in paper-based patient-reported outcome to electronically patient-reported outcome, there is a high difference concerning readability, data quality, and all these by costs that are affected with that.
So they are better at ePRO, correct?
Right.
Yeah. And I have also seen ePRO systems which send out reminders to patients, yeah, for example, to take a medication or to enter data and so on. That's of course quite cool because it increases compliance. But when I think about data protection, we have nowadays quite tough rules and we need to report deviation against these rules. And how does it match with using ePRO? Is there any conflict?
There is no conflict, Andreas. I would even also say it's a good thing that we have so tough rules in here on data protection, since we want to secure data safety and also personal data. With an ePRO system, it needs to be considered during the development of the system that this personal data and all the other data records is not freely accessible. And that's being done within the system directly. It is secured, saved, and encrypted, so nobody can read that data out.
Okay, we spoke about eCRFs and ePRO, but there are much more EDC systems on the market. We have eTMS, we have investigator site files, IVRS, IWRS, CTMS systems, and so on. Yeah, EDC is in the clinical research world quite normal. But is it still normal for investigators? How does it look when you think about the acceptance of investigators? Do they like it? Do they hate it?
In general, I would say that the digital documentation is perceived as very positive. But sure, it comes to personal preferences concerning paper versus electronic records. And they're also about the age. You said it before. Investigators become younger and are more used to electronic tools. Nowadays, I don't know anybody who writes a letter. They send emails, they send SMS, and all the messages. They are quite commonly in use. So, in general, it's quite positive, but there are still remaining people who love to have it the old-fashioned way, writing everything per pencil on paper.
But that's just a matter of time that they are disappearing, I guess.
Yeah.
So EDC is getting more and more normal, and I think all sponsors need to think about EDC systems for their studies. If a sponsor would ask you, they have no experience, but they want to use EDC systems in future, about what do they need to think, what trouble can they expect, and what kind of no-goes should they avoid?
I recommend you to think about 3 topics. First, what kind of sponsor are you? Are you running several studies? Then license fees might be acceptable. Are you only running 1 or 2 studies? Then it does make sense to pay a lot of license fees. Second, what type of person are you? Are you happy to drive a Golf, for example? I would say for almost all studies, a Golf would be perfect. But if you decide on Golf, don't expect a Bentley. The third one, it's not about the system itself, but the provider of that service. Then you have to have a trustful relationship, since using an EDC system also requires the system provider to have validation documentations and fulfill regulatory requirements. And that's essential. Therefore, you have to have the service and the people to conduct also the service within the trial, like cleaning the data, closing the database, therefore needing to operate. Therefore, you need to trust your service provider.
Great, thank you very much, Thomas. I liked very much that you said people are also very important. So even we are speaking about software and very technical topics, somebody needs to take care of the software, correct?
Right, there's always a person behind the machine.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you very much for being here. It was very interesting.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. And I also hope that you liked the video. Please send us your questions, your comments, and subscribe us. See you the next time again. Bye-bye.
Bye.